And the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is an example of that, because for the last several years, the Russians have been trying very hard to get India to be a member, and China has been blocking it because of China's fear that if India becomes a member, China will no longer be as prime, as the prime position in the SCO which China has got will be lost if it comes to India. In my view, it's a mistake. China should not follow this American tradition of trying to be dominant. China should follow a Chinese tradition of harmony, a Chinese tradition of working together, and a Chinese tradition of win-win. Unfortunately, too many people in China have had long years of education abroad. Unfortunately, there is an amazing amount of foreign culture that is now polluting China. I mean, a lot of culture is very good, a lot of educational influences are very good, but you must not forget your basic culture and the basic roots of your tradition. Now, many of the top leaders, they have sent their children abroad. These children have spent more than 40% of their life abroad, and when they come back, they basically come back as foreigners to China. They take up very high positions and they start thinking of policies which are not really suited to the grassroots in China. So in case there is a problem in China today, and there are problems in China today, the reason is policies have been badly affected by the fact that people who do not have a grassroots idea, who do not have a concept of the grassroots, are coming back, taking high positions, because of the fact that their ancestors are influential people or their parents are rich people. So this is a very important problem that is there. And in my view, this SCO is an example of that, in which the Chinese are acting as though they were American, trying to dominate the SCO. Now, what is it? Well, this is the point about that is very simple. In India, I can tell you, we are assuming that the Chinese continue this thing, that in every institution they must have the upper hand. You have seen that in the case of Taiwan also. I would say the Taiwan situation has been a little better because they have handled it with more sensitivity. But in case this Americanization of Chinese policy continues, then very definitely India and America are going to come closer together. Because one thing India is not going to accept is that China will play a dominant or a prime role in Asia. India believes that there are two tigers in the mountain. One is India, one is China. One is a billion people, the other is a billion people. Our economy, despite the problems we are facing now because of extremely bad government, overall, in the long run, our economy is poised for good growth, our demographics is sound, our education levels are pretty good. So we believe that we are the second tiger on the mountain. And therefore, if the Chinese are willing to accept two tigers, there is no problem. If they do not accept two tigers, the situation is going to be created in which India and the United States are going to come, by default, more closer together. So it is a fact that China is bringing India and the United States together. From the Indian point of view, it is to avoid Chinese domination of Asia. We are very clear we do not want the Chinese to dominate Asia. During the time when America was dominating Asia, India was among the few countries that protested strongly against that. If you remember the 1970s, America was supported by China in Asia. Vietnam, Taiwan, Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, all these countries supported America, but India opposed it. India opposed American domination, and India will also oppose Chinese domination of Asia if the Chinese attempt that. So this is a very important point that we need to, that the degree of India-US relations will also depend on the policy of China. The Americans also, of course, are very wary of China. You have seen the various studies in the Pentagon, you have seen the various defense reviews, you have seen the various think tanks giving reports about the PLA, the growth of the PLA, etc. I think they are seriously worried about China, but it's not so much the PLA and the military, but the unspoken worry is the fact that today China has become a technological giant able to challenge the United States and Europe in high technology. 10 years ago, when Hu Jintao took over power, China was still a primitive country in terms of high technology. You went to China, almost everything was foreign. All the high technologies were foreign. Today you find at least 40 to 45% of high technology in China is locally made and locally sourced. R&D in China has improved significantly after Mr. Hu Jintao took over as General Secretary of the party about 10 years ago. So this is really alarming the United States, because I do not believe either the United States or Europe seriously thought an Asian country can challenge them technologically. They never put the kind of technological sanctions, they never put the kind of sabotage activities that they did in the case of Russia. In the case of Russia after 1992, the Clinton administration did its best to sabotage Russian technology, sabotage Russian science, take away scientists, degrade technology, prevent Russians from selling technology. They did their level best, but they ignored China because of a belief that an Asian country, probably, I don't know, I'm just giving, see, these are points which are not really discussed in academics, because academics are very polite. Because we're very polite, we do not discuss inconvenient realities. And racism is an inconvenient reality, which Chinese racism, Indian racism, European racism, American racism is an inconvenient reality, which we academics do not want to talk about at all. So we give X factor, Y factor, Z factor, but we ignore the R factor. But I think it is important that we discuss all factors. For whatever reason, the Americans were quite liberal in giving technology to China, and the Europeans were also quite liberal in giving technology to China, possibly in the belief that being an Asian country, it is not going to rise beyond a certain level. Unfortunately for them, China has risen beyond that level. I would say 2007, 2009 is around the period when China has reached a level in which it can seriously compete in high-tech with the Europeans and Americans. In another 6 or 7 years, it can outbeat them in high-tech. Today you see Huawei, for example. In the old days, Huawei was not at all of high quality. Today Huawei products are exceptionally high quality and 30–40% cheaper than Ericsson or Motorola. So, of course, in this entire process, I would say Taiwan has played a very important role. Taiwanese talent, Taiwanese R&D, Taiwanese research laboratories have played a very crucial role in the development of R&D in China. But whatever the fact is today, China has now become a high-tech power, and therefore it has got to be challenged now. It has got to be challenged in the next 5, 6, 7 years before it crosses a line in which it is too big to challenge. So, in my view, there is a possibility of some kind of a major challenge developing between the US as the leader of the Western world and China. Whether it will become a military challenge, whether it will become an economic challenge, it's hard to say at this point in time. But I think it is very clear the contours of a challenge between China and the United States are developing. I have been having this view for quite some time, but again, it's not a view which has been shared by many who always believe that there will be. But there's some kind of a challenge is developing between China and the United States, for the simple reason that today China is becoming a serious competitor to the European Union and the United States. Within 10 years, I think the Chinese can produce an aeroplane which is better than Airbus and better than Boeing. They're already producing a high-speed railway which is as good or better than any part of the world. And there was an accident, but one accident is not very much in the overall thing. There are teething troubles everywhere. They're going into space, in nanotechnology, in various technologies today. The Chinese are advancing at a very, very fast pace. So it is inevitable, in my view, that there will be tension with the United States and with the European Union, because this is the first serious challenge to Western domination of technology in about 600 years. I was mentioning yesterday this thing that for 600 years, every generation of people in the West, barring short periods of war and conflict and all that, which creates a problem, but barring that, every generation of the Western world has had a better lifestyle than the previous generation. Every generation has improved its economic stature, has improved its lifestyle, improved its habits, methods of work. The first generation to be born, which is going to have a lower lifestyle than the previous generation, has been born in the mid-90s in Europe and the United States. This generation, which has been born in the mid-90s, is having a lower lifestyle than the parents have had. So this, for the first time in 600 years, there's a retreat there's a negative growth of European lifestyle, which is very, very unusual. So that, combined with the high-tech challenge of China, is going to create a huge challenge for Europe and the United States. And one of the only ways in which they can face that challenge would be through the use of, hard power, because that's one of the few areas in which they are still very, very strong. Whatever the means, some method will probably they will want to devise to check this onward expansion of Chinese power. So on the one hand, India, we are not concerned about Chinese power, but we are concerned about Chinese domination of Asia. And here, if the Chinese have a win-win attitude, if they do not seek to impose their will on everything, we are unhappy about the South Sea Islands, because the South China Sea dispute indicates the Chinese mentality is more American than Chinese. If one has a Chinese mentality, one will have a win-win attitude. One will say that all of us can benefit from South China Sea. Okay, we say that this is our sea, but you coming there